Thank you for volunteering to the Lower Great Miami River Water Quality Lab. I'm Sarah Meadows, Public Involvement Coordinator with the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District, coming to you from the Great Miami River. We work closely with Rivers Unlimited to get this lab certified as Level 2 through the Credible Data Program. This means our data from the lab can be used at the state level by Ohio EPA, the county level by the Soil and Water Conservation District, by local nonprofits such as Rivers Unlimited, and others. This data can be used for regulatory purposes to identify red flags that help prioritize projects and other watershed planning purposes. For this reason, it's important that you follow the procedures outlined in this video. For example, every 10th sample will be a duplicate to ensure there are no errors along the way. If this is confusing, don't worry. There will be at least 2 lab managers on site during every sampling day. Mike Miller is the program manager, Lisa Lee is the lab manager, and Bernie Moeller is the quality control officer. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your video.
Okay, first I'm going to start by talking about the items that are used across all of the tests that we'll discuss today in this training video: conductivity, pH, turbidity, chlorophyll, and optical brighteners. We'll start off with the test tube rack. This one here obviously numbered 1 through 10. We will have an additional 7 to 8 of these racks circulating amongst the tests that I just discussed. 7 to 8, depending on the number of samples we get in that day. In addition to those racks, we have the dupes rack, starting with 1 and then proceeding every 10 after that. You can see down here labeled in the corner is a small d, as well as dupes here on the rack. Moving over to the data entry form, this first column will contain the readings for these racks, these 7 to 8 racks, while this dupes column will be for these racks, this dupe rack. Moving on, we have our waste beaker, our distilled water bottle, AccuWipes. These have different purposes depending on the test, and we'll discuss that more later. We have gloves available for anyone who would like to use gloves. And I also want to mention that this happens to be the conductivity data entry form. And underneath this form are the instructions for this particular test. So these are the directions for the conductivity method, and each one of our stations will have a similar data entry form and will also contain the instructions for that method. And we will continue on and discuss each one of those particular tests in detail coming up. Conductivity is a measure of the electric current passage through the water sample. It can indicate environmental problems such as excessive salts that may be harmful to the plants and aquatic organisms. Conductivity can be influenced by the geology of the stream, but it can also come from salted streets for snow and ice. It can also be an indicator of wastewater discharges or septic issues. It also changes with the temperature of the water sample as well. Conductivity. The machine should already be turned on and ready to use. Rinse the probe tip. Blot it a bit. Take our first sample, give it a little shake. We'll bring the probe tip down into the sample. Again, we'll give that a little swirl. We'll let it settle. We'll wait for this to stop blinking. And then record the number. And then we will clean the probe tip, rinse, let it dry. Now we're ready to move on to our number 2 sample. Shake. Little swirl. Let it settle. When this stops blinking, record that number in the number 2 row. pH, it's the measure of how acidic or basic the water sample is based on a scale of 1, which is acidic, to 14, which is basic, where 7 is neutral. pH is an important measure because most plants and animals only survive in a pH range around the neutral range. pH can be altered by intense algal growth, the geology of the stream, and wastewater discharges. Okay, pH. A couple of important things to mention up front when you first get to this station. There will be this little sleeve that goes over the top of the pH probe. The pH probe needs to stay moist or it will go bad, and they are rather expensive. So when you're ready to start doing your readings, you're just going to turn this in a counterclockwise direction, loosen this lid, and just slide this down off of the probe. Okay, and another important feature is there's this little rubber band here at the bottom that keeps this unit from sliding down too far and the tip actually hitting the bottom of the test tube, which could cause damage to the probe tip. So make sure that this little rubber band stays in place, and you'll notice like it'll get to a certain point and stop, and we want to make sure that it stops before we actually hit the bottom of the test tube. Okay, so we had the sleeve on there, so we're going to start by rinsing our probe tip. We have our waste beaker and the DI water. We're going to make sure we hit that probe tip. We're going to take our AccuWhite and we're just going to blot this probe tip dry, or at least get some of that excess water off of there. Okay, so we'll start with sample 1. We'll give that a little shake. Take the lid off, slide that under the probe. Release this by hitting this button here in the back, down into the sample. We'll give that another little shake to coat the probe tip. Let it go. We'll hit the check. Wait for it to stop blinking. And when it stops, we'll record that number. Press the button, lift it back out. Rinse the tip. Blot that with the Kim wipe. And then we can move on to our sample number 2. Give it a little shake. Place it under the probe. Release with the button. Another little swirl. And hit the check mark. Wait for it to stop blinking. And record the number. That's it. Turbidity. Turbidity tells us the concentration of solids in a sample. These can be soil in the water caused by erosion. It can also be sediment dredged up from the bottom and churned up into the water column. It can also be algae in the water will change the turbidity. So we'll start with taking our vial and we'll give it a rinse here 3 times. We'll go all the way around the edges, the sides of the vial 3 times. The 3rd time we'll give it a nice shake into the waste beaker, and then we'll take our first sample. We'll give this a nice solid shake because we want to bring anything up into the water sample that might be sitting on the bottom. But we also don't want to shake it so vigorously that we're creating air bubbles in the sample, because that will also read as turbidity. We'll take our wipe and we're taking our fingerprints and any water droplets off of the side. Sorry, I should have said that because this meter is battery operated, it will turn off, so we just, it's calibrated, it's ready to go, so just hit the on-off button, and we'll put the sample in. We're holding it by the top, so we're not getting our fingerprints back on the sides. Covering it with the cover. Hit this read arrow. Right now there are just dashes, and when the sample has been read, it will give us a number. So again, first column here, we will put the reading. Take the cover off, pull the sample out. We'll dump this into our waste beaker. And again, we'll give this a rinse 3 times all around the sides. Moving on to our number 2 sample. Again, nice shake. We want to bring everything up into the sample without introducing too many air bubbles into the sample. We're pouring in till we reach the collar of the vial. Take our wipe, again holding it by the top of the vial, and completely dry that off. Cover it with the lid, hit the read button, and record. Okay, we have optical brighteners and chlorophyll done on this same fluorometer. We test for optical brighteners to help us understand whether an impact that we're seeing through other tests, say we're seeing high bacteria, it helps us to understand whether that is coming from a human or a non-human source based on the Blue Magic whiteners. And then we test for the chlorophyll to help us understand how much algae is in the water column. So we'll start by taking one of our cuvettes, and we're going to rinse the cuvette 3 times with distilled water. Again, we're getting around the edges. We're going to give it a nice shake to get any excess out of there that we can. And then we're going to take our first sample, give it a nice shake here. And we will pour that in close to the top of the cuvette. We'll take one of our AccuWipes, and again here we're going to give this a nice thorough cleaning to help remove our fingerprints and any water that may be around the cuvette. So we'll put cuvette in the machine, and here we have to make sure that with the optical brighteners we're on channel A, which is this button here. So that shifts it to A, which we see here. And then we're going to hit the read button. Record that in the first column. And then we're simply, for the chlorophyll, we're going to hit that A-B button again here. We'll see that shifts over to the B channel. Again, we'll read. And we put this again in the first column, number 1. Take the cuvette out, we'll We'll dump that into our waste beaker, and then we can move on to our next sample, which here is number 2. Take our cuvette. Again, we're going to rinse that 3 times. Around the sides. Take our sample. I'm sorry, we're going to make sure that we get as much of the excess water out as we can. Take our sample. Still got my wipe in my hand. Put this in the machine. Close the lid. I'm going to switch back over to my A channel and read. It's just saying reading now. Now it's stopped. And we have our number. We're going to hit the AB channel again to shift to B and read. Record in the first column. That is optical brighteners and chlorophyll.
Hi again! Hopefully by now you're getting excited for the sampling season to start. Remember, we sample on second Saturdays from March through November. Samples collected should be turned into the lab no later than 11 a.m. Volunteers for processing should arrive around 10. If for some reason you can't come in or collect your samples, please contact Lisa Link and we'll find a substitute for you. Thanks again, and we look forward to a great sampling season.